Well, welcome to part three of Disaster in Bangkok. I thought I'd get straight on to doing part three. Um, I've still got a memory of what I last said, and I'll just adjust this a wee bit. And I stayed in that hotel, the one after the hospital hotel, or the one close to the hospital. And I think I stayed 1 or 2 days, I can't quite remember. And in the process of those 2 days, because that hotel doesn't have a restaurant, had quite a reasonable breakfast place, but not a proper evening meal. So, in the process of walking from one restaurant, walking down the road anyway, to another restaurant to find a meal, and I was feeling not so bad at walking at the moment because I'd had a good sleep finally, and I happened to walk past a shop that said they were a barber, and I haven't got a problem at the moment, but when my hair grows a little bit, it just sticks up and it looks absolutely ridiculous. So I went to the barber and I went inside the barber's shop, and there was an Australian guy in there waiting to be serviced. Well, waiting to have his toenails clipped. And because he was waiting, he said, and I just wanted a haircut. He said, "Oh, go ahead, have your haircut first, and I'll wait until you're finished." So the girl that was there asked me to sit in the chair, and she gave me a pretty good haircut. I didn't have a beard then. I was quite easy to just trim that to number one. So that got done fairly quickly. And while she was doing my hair, this Australian guy was talking to me and asking me all sorts of questions and talking about his situation and blah blah blah. And when the Thai lady finished trimming my hair, she said, "You can stay in the chair if you want," and swiveled the chair right round to face the Australian guy, and I sat in the chair and watched him have his nails clipped, toenails, and his toenails were pretty bad, very ugly looking. And anyway, she did a fantastic job of doing his toenails. And while he was having his toenails done, he was yak 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 to me. And the short story is that he said the hotel that he was staying in was a really good one. Had nice people, had a swimming pool, and I think he said it had it. I can't remember if he said about the gym, but he recommended that I go to his hotel, and it sounded quite tempting. So I said okay, and when we left the barber shop, he said, "Just follow me." And of course, he went and grabbed a motorbike taxi, hopped on the back, and took off up the road. And of course, I've never ridden on the back of a motorbike before, and it seemed extremely dangerous to me. But I had no choice. He was on the bike and up the road. So I said to the next motorbike taxi in the line, I said, "Oh, can you follow that taxi? Wherever he goes, take me." So he took me to that. He followed that taxi driver, and that was a terrifying experience because I think I said in my last video, they don't always stay on the left side of the road like they should. They go onto the right hand side and pass all the cars while you're sitting on the back. And he didn't go on the footpath though, and the the other guy turned down this little side street and took me to where his hotel was. So we went off and he introduced me to the reception staff there, and they were very nice, like he said, and spoke English, and I decided that I would move to that hotel. So I went back to my hotel. I can't remember if I walked or took a taxi or a motorbike taxi. And I told the people in the hotel that I was leaving and that I was going somewhere else. And I had another good night's sleep, and I went to, the next day, I went to this particular hotel just up the road. And I went in there and I said I'd like to book in for, I booked in the day before and I booked a room. And when I got there, they welcomed me and said you can go up to your room. And that was quite difficult because my room was sort of like on a mezzanine floor, and there was no lift to that level. They did have lifts that went to other rooms on different floors, but not my particular room was up some stairs, and those stairs were very difficult to get up, especially with my suitcase. So I managed to make it up to the hotel room, and it must have been evening because I don't remember having a meal or anything like that. So I went to bed in this in the next hotel, and once again I couldn't sleep, I couldn't breathe or sleep, and I started coughing like crazy. And I thought, oh no, what the hell's wrong? And the next morning I discovered that it wasn't as bad as the hotel beside the hospital, but they did have quite a bit of wood veneer, and I thought, oh, don't tell me I'm allergic to the formaldehyde in this room. So the next morning I wasn't feeling the best, but I really felt like a proper coffee, a cappuccino or something. So I looked on my phone for the nearest cappuccino shop, or the nearest cafe, I should say, and it turned out that there was a cafe just up this little side road. So I went up this little side road back towards the main street, and I went into this lobby area, and on the other side of the lobby was Siri's Cafe, and I went in there to have a cup of coffee. Now, if you go back to my previous video, which is season 2, episode 1. This is episode 2, but it's part 3. Okay, very confusing, but I don't feel like doing another video. So I went into that video, which you can see in the other video. Went into Siri's Cafe and ordered a cup of coffee, and I think a toasted sandwich as well. And while I was waiting for my coffee, a man came in with a big bunch of keys, and he said something about room 140. So I said to this lady, whose name turned out to be Siri, very confusing if you're trying to tell your Siri computer what to do. And I said to her, how come was talking about room 140? And she said, oh, there's a hotel above this coffee lounge and above this cafe. And she said the reception for the hotel's just over there. So when I finished my coffee and toasted sandwich, I went back into the lobby. Fortunately, Siri's Cafe is a little tiny cafe, but you have to open the door and shut the door, and it's air conditioned, so it was nice and cool compared to Thailand's hot weather. So I went over to the reception and I met this very nice Thai man, and I said to him, is this a hotel? Are there rooms up above? And he said, yes sir, there's rooms up above. And I said, well, if you've got any vacant rooms, can I have a look at it? And he said, yep, sure. So he took me up to this double bedroom, one bedroom with a double bed in it, and said, you can have this room. And I looked around the room, and I could not see any wood veneer anywhere. It was quite an old hotel, so they had old wood panelling, but not actual stuck-on wood veneer that would be stuck on with formaldehyde. And so I booked into that room, and then that particular night I was still having trouble breathing, and I had my heart monitor, the one blood pressure monitor that you put round your arm, and I was watching my blood pressure, and it was getting higher and higher, I think around about 150, 160, which actually got me quite worried because I was still having trouble breathing despite there not being any formaldehyde around me. And I was getting quite panicky, so I couldn't sleep that whole night despite all the asthma medication I was taking. Didn't seem to help. So incidentally, I've found out since that asthma medication is the worst medication for heart failure. It's bad for your heart because asthma medication is actually a steroid, and that's bad for your heart. I didn't realise that at the time. So I was taking lots of asthma medication, all the different types that the doctors and the pharmacist had given me. And the next morning, I was feeling terrible, and my blood pressure was really high. So I managed to get back downstairs to reception, and I said to this Thai guy, whose name was On, they have short names in Thailand, so his name was On. There's a story about that too. And I said to him, can you call an ambulance for me because I feel terrible. I don't know if I'm going to make it. And On said to me, well, if you call an ambulance, they are very expensive. And he said, you're probably better off just calling a grab car. So I said, okay, do that then. So he ordered a grab car for me to come and pick me up and take me to the nearest hospital. The hospital that I'd just been at and told I wouldn't get a venesection. So finally this car turned up and took me to the hospital. And of course, because I had just gone downstairs, I went with my phone, but I didn't take my charger or any other stuff because I was feeling so unwell. I just went down and asked for an ambulance, and a car came, took me to the hospital, and I said, where do I go for emergency service? And the car driver didn't know, so I hopped out of the car, and there was a security guard sort of guy there keeping an eye on everybody coming in, and I asked him, where do I go for emergency for the emergency department? And he said, I'll just go in that door just there, and that's the emergency department. So I went in there, and there was one lady and another guy sitting behind a computer and talking to this one lady when I went in there. So I kind of just sat down and I was waiting for this lady to finish talking. And they talked and talked and talked. I don't know what about, because it was probably in Thai language. And finally I stood up and said, excuse me, I'm dying. I felt really terrible. Can I have an emergency doctor or something? And he says, okay, just wait there. A nurse will come out and see you. So I waited, I sat back down and I waited, and finally a nurse came out and took me into their little rooms, with curtains. And I told the nurse that I was feeling really bad, and a doctor came around, and I said that I'm feeling really bad, I can't breathe properly, and blah, 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 blah. Anyway, they did everything. They took my blood pressure, which was really high, and they gave me some asthma medication again, which it must have been strong medication because it did help my breathing. And then they said they'd like to do a few more tests, so they took a blood test, and I can't quite remember what happened after that. And they said, oh, you definitely are very sick, and you need to go up to ward number blah blah blah. And I said, okay, I'll do that. So they actually wheeled my bed right up. I don't know how they did that. They took me out into a lift, up the lift, and into one of their rooms in the hospital, the same hospital I'd been at before. And pretty much straight away, a cardiologist came in, and she says, oh, we need to do a echo. Oh, they did an echocardiogram where they stick all sorts of things on you and measure, what your heart's doing. And they did all that, and then they said, oh, we need to do a scan of your heart. So next thing they came in with the cardiologist came in with a laptop and that jelly stuff that they put on you. She put all this jelly on, and what's that called? Radiocardiogram, I think it's called. And I could hear my heart going bump, 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 and I could hear all the sounds. And she measured my ejection fraction on my heart. Now, I didn't know anything about this at the time. Oh, yes, I did. I did know about it. And she said, your ejection fraction is only 13%. Now, last time I was very sick, my ejection fraction was 20%. And they considered that really, really seriously bad. And they were very worried about me here in New Zealand. And they asked me to go to the hospital every 2 weeks. And that was because of a 20% ejection fraction. Well, now my ejection fraction had gone down to 13%. 13%. So they said, oh, your heart is very bad. It's, you're in danger of dying. That's not exactly encouraging. And I said, well, is there anything you can do about it? And they said, yes, we'll give you heart medication. And they rattled off a whole lot of drugs. And they said, we won't give you any more asthma medication because that's just making it worse. And and I said to the cardiologist, I said, well, look, it must cost me quite a lot of money to stay in this room. And she said, yes. And even before I went up to that room, a Thai lady came in with a clipboard and said, because you're a foreigner, you have to pay, and we need you to make a deposit. And I said, okay, that's all right. And they wanted a deposit of 400,000 baht. And when in my sick state, I managed to convert that to New Zealand dollars. That's $20,000. Well, I didn't have $20,000. I says, I haven't got $20,000 here with me. I did have more money than that, which that's another story. But it was in investments in different banks in New Zealand. And I said, I would have to get that money out in order to pay the 20,000. I said, but do have a credit card, American Express credit card, and there's a $10,000 limit on that, and I hadn't used any of it. And they said that will help. So I actually paid $10,000 for my stay in the hospital, and I paid with half of the deposit with my American Express card. And so when the cardiologist said, you're very sick, you might die, you need to probably stay a whole week, in this hospital. And I said, I can't afford to stay for a whole week and pay all the fees for this hospital. Just get me well enough to leave the hospital and fly back to New Zealand, because everything's free in New Zealand. And so she said, well, we'll put you on a diuretic to get, because, not only that, after that 13% scan, they said we need to give you an x-ray. So I thought, oh no, they're going to have to wheel me down to the x-ray room like they do in New Zealand and wait for 2 or 3 hours for an x-ray. And no, the next minute a girl comes in with a mobile x-ray machine, a big machine that she could push around on wheels, and she put something behind my back and told me to hold my breath, and everybody left the room, and she took an x-ray of my chest. And when the cardiologist, she got to see it straight away, the cardiologist got to see it straight away, and whereas in New Zealand you have to wait a couple of months for the results of the x-ray. Anyway, she says, you've got a large amount of water in your lungs because your heart's not pumping properly. And I thought, really? And she says, yes, you'll need to stay at least a week in the hospital to fix that. I said, I can't afford a whole week. Can you give me something so that I can get out of the hospital tomorrow and go back to New Zealand? And she says, well, we'll give you some diuretics, and we'll give you extra strong diuretics to get the water out of your lungs, and then you can leave the hospital as soon as possible. So they started giving me an intravenous diuretics. I'm not sure what brand it was, but that makes you pee all the time. And they had to put a catheter in me so that I didn't wet the bed. And this diuretic took a lot of water out of my lungs. Well, the next day, they came in and did, I'm not sure what they did, took another x-ray to see how my water level was, and my blood pressure and all sorts of other tests. I think they might have even done another echocardiogram. Echocardiogram, they call it. Echo, that's the word, not radio. Echo. And anyway, the cardiologist got very concerned, and she said, your statistics are getting worse, and we're worried that you might die, so we want to put you down in ICU, intensive care unit. I said, I don't believe it. I wanted to get out of here, but apparently because they tried to get the water out of my lungs as fast as possible, which is what I requested, I then got even more sick. They shouldn't have actually done it so fast because my body couldn't cope with it. So I ended up in intensive care with all sorts of instruments attached to me to make sure I didn't die. This is the disaster in Bangkok, okay? In case you're wondering. And so I gave up trying to get back to New Zealand. I just wanted to get well, and whatever it cost, too bad. And I can't remember how long I was in ICU. I think it was 1 or 2 days I was in ICU, and then I must have gotten a little bit better, and they said, we'll put you back up in your room. And I now remember that, while I'm talking, I remember that when I went up to the room first, it was a 2-person room with a curtain across, so you couldn't see the other patient. And the other patient, the one next to me, he had the best room because he could see out the window, and you could see, all of Bangkok outside and below. And so I was in that room, and the guy next to me, he was in a lot of pain because he'd had a burst appendicitis. And I think he was also a YouTuber because I recognised him when he walked past. And we had a little chat, and he said he had a burst appendicitis and they had to drain something out. And he said it was extremely painful. But he was there a couple of days while I was there. And this was before... No, he was there... Yeah, he was there before me. And I was in my room for a couple of days. But his appendicitis got better fairly quickly. In other words, they cured him. And he left the room. And when he was gone, I said to the nurses, I said, is there any chance I can move from my room to that room? Because that room had a window and looked really nice. So they actually moved me from my room to the next room. By the way, these are very nice rooms. They have a big screen TV at the end of the bed. You can't have the sound on, but they give you headphones so that you can watch the TV without making a big lot of noise. Both rooms had a TV, and the bed was very comfortable, way more comfortable than the integrated intensive care unit. I don't know why that is. And so I was in there, in that room, and I must have been in that room for a couple of days, and 2 or 3 days, I can't remember, and they provided everything. I had coffee and or tea, but I had coffee with milk, not coffee mate. Took them a while to find the coffee though, but they did have it. It was in a drawer in my room, and the meals were fantastic. The breakfast, lunch and dinner were all fantastic, and I ordered the breakfast, lunch and dinners each day. And I had beautiful fruit, mango, pineapple, etc., on dragon fruit, if you know what that is. Very nice, and very nice Thai meals. And unfortunately they discovered I was diabetic as well, so they had to cut out the sugar. So that wasn't quite so good. But still, the meals were still pretty good considering they were diabetic meals. And anyway, eventually, I got well enough to get out of bed and go to the toilet myself instead of all this other business. They would... I won't go into that. You don't need to know that. And I was able to get out of bed and take they took the catheter out so I could get out of bed and go to the toilet myself. And I was getting better and better, and I was able to get up and look out the window and see all of Bangkok City, and at night, all the lights. It was a fantastic view, which I'll show you in a minute. I've got a video of that, and I'll stop this video when I go to do that. But before that, because I moved into the better room, another guy moved into the room beside me, and it turned out he was another Australian. And he was a very interesting man. He was very rich, and he was so rich that one of his business partners stole $250,000 off him. So he must but he still had plenty of money, but he lost $250,000, and he sort of had similar investments to what I've got, and we talked and talked and talked about all sorts of things, money, political things, everything. And we talked and talked and talked, and suddenly we realised that it was midnight, and we'd been talking all night, all evening. And he said, "Oh, we better stop talking." And I agreed. So we stopped talking. Well, he fell asleep, but I didn't. I was awake that whole night. I don't know why. I was breathing okay, but for some reason I couldn't sleep. So anyway, that was very interesting, and I think now I will stop this video. Oh, I've been talking for half an hour. Isn't that incredible? I don't talk much normally. It's just on these videos. So if you're really wanting to get to sleep, watch my videos, because apparently they're really boring, and people watch my videos in order to get to sleep. That's very complimentary, isn't it? Anyway, I'll stop this video now, and I'll try and insert a video of where I was. Okay, bye for now. Well, I've decided not to do any more on this video and add more pictures, etc., because this video is getting too long already. So I just thought I would finish off with a little bit about our friend Bob, who you'll notice is not up here, and just to let you know that he is feeling better, but he's not that well. So I'll just give you so he is feeling better in the sense that he has turned over. But because it's such a long story, tell you about his traumatic experience another time. Okay, so that's the end of my video, and I'll try and get myself in the middle of it, and we'll live long and prosper, and I'll see you at the next video, and I'll have a lot more videos and pictures in the next one, okay, and add some extra to what happened to me in the hospital, okay. All right, bye for now.